It is an absolute pleasure for me today to be interviewing, on behalf of Cambridge University Entrepreneurs, the wonderful Martin Sorrell, who is the executive chairman of S4 Capital, which is a global digital advertising and marketing services company, and is also very well known as the former CEO of WPP, which he managed to build into the largest advertising and marketing services company in the world, and is also a very valued and treasured member of Cambridge University Entrepreneurs Steering Committee. So again, thank you so much for your support.
Haven't done much to justify that that introduction, particularly in relation to the last item. But anyway, go on.
Fair enough.
I'll try and do my best.
Well, thank you for your time with this interview, regardless.
Pleasure.
So my first question to ask you is, what originally got you into the world of business?
Well, so it goes back to my father, I guess. My father was a retailer. His parents came from, we think, Kiev, from the Ukraine in 1899, landed here into the East End of London, and my father had to leave school at the age of 13, despite being a great violinist, well-versed in Shakespeare and the Talmud, but he had to leave at the age of 13 because he was one of 6, and you had to be an income-producing unit for the family. Because my grandfather and grandmother, my Bubba and my Zayda, as they would call it in Yiddish, were not exactly wealthy. They were immigrants. Wouldn't have got in on the point system. They wouldn't have got in today. But in any event, he had to go to leave school, and he became, I think, what I would call a barrack room lawyer, and then went into retail, and very successful managing director of retail division of Industrial Holding Company. And so my roots were very much in watching him, as a 7-day-a-week worker. I mean, we lived in North London, and he journeyed every day to Putney, where the headquarters and warehouses were. And he did that 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, he would take me to visit stores. And I would see him get his sales figures from his managers, regional managers, every Sunday. So, it was sort of inbuilt, I guess, or inbred, or I was not schooled, but I was accustomed. I would go on trips with him on a Sunday to look at stores. Despite that, he had no architectural background or design background. He was quite revolutionary in the way that he built stores and fitted stores out. Very modern approach. So really, it was born and bred. And his advice to me was, find an industry that you enjoy, find a company within that industry that you enjoy, build a reputation, not externally as much, but people understood that you've been successful in building that business. And if at an age 40 or whenever you felt like starting your own business, start your own business. I think one thing he regretted, and I regretted on his behalf, is he didn't have his own business. He always was referred to being the donkey in the traces. In the hauling the cart, and I think that's sad, actually, because I think he would have been tremendously successful if he, but of course never, had a wife, got married at a fairly young age. I had a brother who died at birth, so I was sort of the spoiled only child. And my father was very keen for me to have the education that he didn't have, and I had a tremendous education at Harvard Ashes, at Cambridge, at Harvard, and so I was extremely fortunate that he did that for me, and my mother did that for me. So I would say it was sort of inbred, really. I mean, it was this whole question: are entrepreneurs born, or are they trained or educated? And probably the answer is both, actually, at the end of the day. But I had a little bit of both.
And so what then attracted you? Because your father said, okay, pick something you like. So what then, my question is, what attracted you to the world of advertising and marketing?
Well, after I left Cambridge, I went straight to Harvard Business School, which was quite unusual. Dean Athos, who was the admissions tutor at HBS, described our class as the most naive the Harvard Business School ever had, because it was the time of the draft, the Vietnamese draft, so a lot of Americans would go straight to university, to graduate school, to avoid the draft. So I was pretty young. I had done my summer job was writing. It was in 1966. I wrote an article for Management Today on graduate recruitment from Cambridge. Actually, quite funny.
Yeah.
And then I worked for my father actually as a radio and TV salesman, and in the credit approval section on hire purchase agreements for him. But I went to HBS and I did a summer with Marks and Spencer. I went there and did a couple of surveys for them, research work, and then I went into consulting. I went into marketing consulting in America after HBS. But I had to leave because otherwise I would be drafted. My mother wouldn't let me be drafted.
Yeah.
Spoiled Jewish child, you've got to come back home. So I came back home and I went to work for Mark McCormack, who ran a big IMG, which now Ari Emanuel and WME own, and which was a big sports agency, so managed the affairs of Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, Rod Laver, people like that. And then I wanted to do something with my father. I had a brief sort of flirtation with that. And one of the sadnesses of my life, actually, apart from the fact my father never started his own business, was that we tried to get together and build a business, but it didn't work. I mean, despite the fact I used to be very close to him and would speak to him, I'm not exaggerating, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day, but that's before the time, on a fixed line, before the time of mobile phones. We just couldn't hit it off from a business point of view. So I then we tried that, and then I went to James Gulliver. Left Mark McCormack because I wanted to do something with my dad. And then I went to James Gulliver. James was a successful entrepreneur in the retail area, and he had made a lot of money. And I was his so-called personal financial advisor, really his gopher. I was his turtle, really. But we invested in a number of companies. We invested in Tatner Rutledge, a sweet company up in Manchester or Liverpool, Manchester, and then Sayers Confectioners in Liverpool, a bakery, all both public companies. Alpine Holdings, which was a double glazing company. So we invested in a number of companies, and one of the companies we invested in was Garland Compton, which had been reversed into a shell company called Birmingham Crematorium by Pat Matthews, who was sort of an acolyte of Jim Slater. If anybody remembers who Jim Slater was, it was a very aggressive investment banker, so the forerunner of private equity in a sense, but using the public markets. And Pat Matthews had this thing called Birmingham Crematorium, and Garland Compton was injected into it. And then the chairman of Garland Compton, Ken Gill, wanted a more creative agency. And so the Saatchi brothers reversed their agency into it. And James Gulliver had a stake in Garland Compton, which he promptly sold, actually, funnily enough. He made a terrible mistake by selling it when Saatchi was injected into it. And it was interesting, actually, because the result of the transaction, the assets per share sank because Saatchi had no assets, but they had earnings. And the earnings per share leapt, even on the terms of the injection, and the PE came down. But James, who was a retailer, had this fixation about net assets per share and freehold property and everything, and we promptly sold it. It was a disastrous mistake, actually, disastrous mistake. But through that, I came into contact with the Saatchi brothers, and they were looking. I did consultancy work for them. I had an office in Charlotte Street. I would go in there I'd be there most days of the week working on James's business. But I would do a day a week on Saatchi. I got to know the Saatchi brothers, liked them. We did some consulting work, and then Morris wanted to find the CFO, and he went around Fleet Street at that time trying to interview finance directors of newspaper groups, and most of them you had to interview before 11 o'clock in the morning, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Or certainly before lunchtime. And in a fit of exasperation, he said to the headhunter, the guy called Brian Burwash of Goddard, Kate and Rogers, he said, because Brian couldn't find a candidate, and exasperated Morris apparently said, I'd like somebody like Martin. And Brian said, well, what have you asked Martin? And Morris said, no. Why don't you? Well, I'll ask him. So that was it. And I liked the brothers. I liked the industry. Tim Bell, sadly died recently, was a real talent. Jeremy Sinclair on the creative side, Bill Muirhead on the account side. I mean, all of them were great fun. And you were only as good as your last ad. And the great thing about the advertising business is there were no barriers to entry. So it was like sports and entertainment. You're only as good as your talent. And I got involved with Morris. I was their finance director for 9 years, I think it was in the end. We had a very successful run. I still think that those days in the 80s, the late 70s and the 80s, when every week Campaign magazine would carry a headline, Saatchi wins £1 million account, which, whether true or not, it was a great headline. And £1 million in those days was a lot of money. It was great. It was great fun. And you nothing was impossible. And you could do anything you wanted as long as you didn't get any external credit for it. That's true. But it was just great fun. So I did what my dad said, find an industry that you like, find a company that you like, and build a reputation, which I did do until I was 40. And I got the bug. I mean, 40 is an interesting age. It's maybe not the age, maybe now. I mean, I'm 75 and I'm still working, but at that time, you probably started when you were about 20. 40 was the midpoint.
Yeah.
You look back on the first 20 years and you were thinking, well, I'll retire when I'm 60. Yeah. And the second 20 years. So that was I remember Jeremy Bullmore, who was the chairman of J. Walter Thompson, who I met subsequently with WPP when we took over JWT in 87. And Jeremy has been a friend and advisor for many years, still at WPP, and he does his 3 or 4 days a week. And I remember saying to him what we were doing and how we were going about it, and he was a great confidant in terms of building the business. So we built. I went into. I left WPP and made an investment in Warren Plastic Products, and the rest is as history as your introduction says.
Yeah, I think one really interesting point that you made is you didn't feel like you'd built a reputation until you were 40. One impression that I get is that younger people feel like they want all the success now. They want it all now at the age of 22. And then they look up at the people who are quite successful and they don't realize how long it actually takes and all of the labor that goes behind that.
Well, that's because they look at all the examples, the Zuckerberg, Larry Pages and everybody, and they look at those and they say Jeff Bezos. I mean, remember, Jeff Bezos, it wasn't an easy start for him, and almost went belly up. I mean, it's I think it was Ruth Porat actually, who's now the CFO of Google, who was at Morgan Stanley, I think it was, or JP Morgan at the time, and when Bezos did a sort of a rescue convertible. Or rescue rights issue. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she was probably responsible for bailing him out of a very difficult situation. So, but there are a lot of young entrepreneurs who've made it very early nowadays. And so it's natural, I think, for people to be impatient. I mean, just give you another example. I remember I was on the Stanford campus, the MBA campus, and one of the professors there saying to me, that the young men and women go to Stanford not to do their MBA, but but to network. You know, you know, it's a 2-year program. They're off to the races after. Yeah, the impatience of youth. I mean, thinking about that, you know, in fact, one regret I have probably is not starting a bit earlier. You know, maybe I should have gone off when I was 35. But I had a great, you know, as I say, I mean, Saatchi's was really great because 9 years there, and you literally could do anything. With one caveat was you didn't get any public credit for it, but you could. You had total freedom. I mean, as long as what you did was good and successful, you had total freedom. It was a great time, and great time for the industry. The industry worked on a commission basis. You know, we got 15% of billings, and whilst in formulation, I remember when we were doing Procter Pampers, you know, the paper factories were being built in the middle of America, and it took a long time to launch the product, and we didn't get any commission, and we were working hard on the launch before the launch, and we didn't get any commission. But when they launched big. I mean, Procter's tactics at that time, they had a target market share, you know, say we want to get 25% of the market, whatever it is, and they kept on spending until they got to that market share. I mean, it was quite an interesting way of going. So it was very exciting, and it was a young company, very young management, no barriers. We could do anything. We were very aggressive on acquisitions, or aggressive on organic growth, very aggressive on acquisitions. So it was an exciting place. So that probably limited me in the sense that it encouraged me to stay there for a long period of time. And to your point, you know, probably if I had gone at 35, you know, that probably would have been a better thing. But the attractions of Saatchi were substantial. I made, you know, I owe the brothers a lot because, you know, they gave me the opportunity to make a little bit of money. I borrowed £250,000 against my Saatchi stock to buy into WPP, or Wire and Plastic Products as it was then. So they gave me the seed corn for Wire and Plastic Products and WPP.
Well, one question I have for you is, so back when you were at Saatchi, like, there were no barriers to entry, you could do anything you wanted. How, since those days, do you think the world of advertising and marketing has changed?
Well, the model's changed. I mean, the model that we built at Saatchi. So, you know, if I think about my 3 lives so far, you know, sort of commercially, if you like, Saatchi's was about globalization. I mean, in 1983, Theodore Levitt, Professor Levitt, the famous marketing professor at Harvard Business School, wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review about globalization and its impact. And his thesis was, and he in 2003, we did a 20-year reprise of his article at Harvard Business School with him. He was still alive. He was dying, sadly, of cancer. But he did admit that he over-egged the pudding in order to make the point. And then in this article, because I interviewed him on the 20th year, it was very nice, actually. And in that article, he said, consumers are going to consume everything in the same way everywhere. I mean, that was the basic thesis. Yeah. Not quite as strong as that, but pretty much so. And directionally, that was true. And I remember Morris running around to my office on the 6th floor of Charlotte Street, sort of screaming, "Eureka, Eureka, I found it." You know, I found our thesis, that was going to be our thesis. So Saatchi was about globalization. And WPP, or Wire and Plastic Products, was about the continuation of globalization. You know, ultimately, we expanded into 113 countries, which you don't have to do now. S4 is in 30 countries, and that's sufficient. Maybe we need to be in Germany, but basically you can hub now with technology in a way that you couldn't then. But Saatchi about globalization, WPP about a continuation of globalization and the beginnings of tech. And you describe S4 as being an advertising and marketing company. Well, it is, but it isn't, because increasingly it's obvious to us that we're more a tech company. Certainly the stock market regards us as being more a tech company than an advertising and marketing services company. And the model, as I said before, has now shifted. And S4, just taking to the third life for a minute, is purely about tech. Now, the model has shifted. The Wire and Plastic Products model, the WPP model, the Omnicom model, the IPG model, the Dentsu, the Havas inside the Vendi model, the Publicis model, is past its sell-by date. The idea that you could build, share by having competing agencies in the same operation, competing brands, I think is now a busted flush. And my view is, frankly, that they should. I'm still a shareholder and the largest individual shareholder in WPP, and I think it should be broken up. Its market value is now well below its breakup value by a significant sum. And ultimately, it will get broken up. It'll either get broken up by its management, its board, unlikely but possible, or by an external force, an activist, or a PE firm. So, but the model doesn't work anymore because vertical models with, the idea was probably sort of rooted in the P&G Unilever detergent models. You had competing detergent brands, and it didn't matter if they cannibalized one another at the margin or even at the because you built market share. That's gone. Clients want, in an age of technology, they want a unitary company, I think. And that's what we're doing at S4. We have 4 basic principles, purely digital because that's where the growth is. A holy trinity model, as we call it, a first-party data driving the creation of advertising content and pumping it out programmatically. A tagline, faster, better, cheaper, or speed, quality, value, and a unitary structure. And that last point about unitary structure is key. We want everybody facing in the same direction at the same point in time with one P&L, which clients can call on. So, that's how I see the progression, from Saatchi about globalization to WPP about globalization and the beginning of tech. And S4 is purely a tech play. I mean, we're totally focused on top-line growth with good margins, decent margins, and we don't want to be technologically disrupted or disintermediated. So we're not an ad tech or we're in the services layer. We're providing the services.
Yeah, you seem really excited about your work at S4, and so I just want to play devil's advocate for a second and say, right now, if you wanted to be, with the wealth that you've amassed, you could be retired. Yeah. So why do you keep doing what you do? What keeps you in the game?
I think retired people, this is terrible, getting into terrible trouble. Retired people become vegetables. I mean, and I'm serious. I think if you lose the stimulation, I didn't. What were the alternatives? When I left WPP, I could do nothing. Right? I mean, I would get very bored, but I could do nothing. I could do portfolio. I could do non-exec, but I think that's a horrendous thing, dipping in and out of things and not really digging into things. I suppose I could have found a private equity firm in some way, shape, or form, but I think that tends to be too short term. But what I wanted to do, and I was intrigued. My departure from WPP was controversial and for me unpleasant. And there's looking at WPP, there were elements of it that were growing. Overall it wasn't growing, or not as fast as we would like it to be. But there were, if something is zero, there's stuff that's growing, as you know, and there's stuff that's declining. And the growing bits sort of interested me. The growing bits were around first-party data, around digital advertising content, and around programmatic or digital media planning and buying. And I thought if you could put those three together, rather like the election models that you see, whether it be for referenda or for election campaigns, I think clients now are running campaigns that like elections but without an election date. It's 24/7 or always on. So the model has changed. It's morphed into a very different model. It's not you don't create a perfect film you use big ideas, but you don't create a perfect film anymore, which takes 3 or 6 months to produce in the Nevada desert or wherever it is. You produce content, you pump it out, you see how consumers react, and then you refine it, and you improve it. So it's a different model. But coming back to your question, I couldn't have just sat and done nothing or played golf. I always say golf is an old man's sport. You have to remember that I started with McCormack, and he managed all the great professional golfers, Palmer, Blair, and Nicholas. I had the opportunity to play golf, but I never found it that interesting. I like cricket, but you need 21 other people to play that with, and a couple of umpires, and a lot of an expanse of ground. So no, it just, retirement didn't. And then when I left, people said, well, take a rest, take a holiday, and I just wanted to get back on the horse as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I totally understand. Just having that stimulation, feeling like you're not on holiday for the rest of your life. Because at some point you just feel a bit like, what's my purpose now?
You're sitting there waiting for the axe to fall.
Exactly.
That's not something. So, as I think my oldest son said, I will die in seat 1A. So,
I love that.
So I hope that will not be the case, but I don't think I will inhabit seat 1A given what's been happening recently as much as I used to. I think my travel patterns will be changed, but no, I want to stay active, and I see myself. I've got with S4 when we started it, which is almost 2 years ago. So we're 2 years in of what is a 5-year run, and I've said after 5 years, if everybody wants me to stay on, and if I'm physically and mentally healthy, I'll do another five years. So this could be, something that takes me to the beginnings of my 80s, the foothills of my 80s. And if I'm physically and mentally able, I'll carry on as long as I can. I've seen people, work into their 90s. So you look at Buffett and Munger, Rupert Murdoch, Sumner Redstone, to a very old age. So, I don't think, and you see with Sir Tom Moore, or Captain Sir Tom Moore, that, anything is possible, even if you're 99 or verging on 100. So, ageism doesn't work.
Yeah, age is just a number. I love that spirit. Before I ask you my final question, because I do want to be respectful of time, throughout your career, I'm wondering, what do you think is perhaps one skill that just really moved the needle for you? Like one skill that you developed?
Well, I don't think it's brain surgery. I don't think you have to be a nuclear scientist or a Nobel Prize winner. That probably helps, but I'm certainly not. At Cambridge, I got a 2.2, but that was in the 60s when today a 2.2 would be the equivalent of 2.1, an upper second, or maybe a minor first, with grade inflation. No, okay. I'm joking. No, so I don't think it's about brain surgery. I think when you get knighted, you have to go to the College of Heraldry and you have to devise a shield and a motto. And mine is persistence and speed, and or speed and persistence. And I think those, it's not one. If you said to me, pick one of those two, I think agility is the key, speed is the key asset that any corporation has to have now. And big companies can do it. Elephants can dance. Amazon dances. It's not the world's most valuable company at the moment. Apple is, but Apple is no different. They dance too. They produce a cheap phone at a time when probably coming out of COVID-19, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. And that, I think, will be a big success as an example. But Amazon pivots, every quarter. Bezos is spending $1 billion on hiring 175,000, $1 billion on COVID-19 testing, tracking devices, which they could then license to others. Agility is really important. So agility or speed. And then I think persistence. If you ask me for one quality, coming back, it's persistence. Again, go back to Morris and Charles. Nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
Rudyard Kipling's quote. Whilst others are basically losing their minds. That quality is really important. So persistence. You never give up. Never give up. If you feel you have a strong idea or a strategy, and you believe in it, despite what anybody says, the famous, the rejection letters. If you've written a book and you send a book in to the publishers, you get 60 rejection letters. The 61st might be, yes, we'll go ahead. So keep going.
Yeah, that's some really, really great insight, which, I mean, it seems obvious to me. I don't think it's a particularly great insight, but I think, it's a good point,
so
though.
Difficult. Yeah, listen, we all have our reverses. We all have our ups and downs, and that can happen during the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade. But play the long game, and, it's not over until the fat lady sings, as they say.
Exactly. It's the tortoise who wins the race, not the hare. So I'd like to finally ask you, and this isn't the be-all, end-all, this is kind of things that come to your mind right now, but what are 3 key truths about the entrepreneurial journey that you'd like to share with a young entrepreneur today?
3 of them?
Yeah.
Well, I think, you have to have... certainly strategically, you can over-intellectualize this stuff, because there was, amongst the business schools, I think a few years ago, there was a big debate, whether strategy was more important than structure, and implementation, or implementation, you as long as you could implement, didn't matter what the strategy was. No, basically, I think one of them would be understanding. The strategic understanding is critically important. Now, I was watching a webinar with David Bonderman of TBG, and his 2 fundamental principles were good business, good management. It's the old. He said it was Richard Rainwater who had made this quote, but Warren Buffett's quote about when a good management come into contact with the bad business always wins.
Yeah.
So. I think you have to have a strategic underpinning, that's really important. So that's the good business part of it, if you like. The management part of it, which also has to be good. Structurally, you've got to have the right structure to implement that. You've got to have the right implementation. So I look at it in a very, maybe this is HBS background and case studies and things, but I think you look at it strategically and structurally. And then I think the third thing is what I said before, which is about persistence. If you've got the strategy right and you've got the structure right, persistence. I mean, in this day and age, being a listed company, is that critical? Maybe not. I enjoy it because I enjoy interfacing with all the stakeholders, whether that be the people inside the company, the clients, the share owners, the analysts, the journalists, government, as much as you do. I mean, having access to or being involved with that, I enjoy, but other people don't. It depends on your personality. But I think getting the strategy right, getting the structure right, and then being persistent about it, never giving up. Those are the 3 things I think that are being relentless in implementing that strategy and that structure, and never don't let the day-to-day stuff push you off strategy. I always remember it was Gordon Brown who said. We were talking about the difference between politics and business. And he said, well, when you're in politics, when you go to bed at night, when you wake up in the morning, everything's changed. You never know what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning. Well, actually, running a business on a much different scale is exactly like that. When you go to bed at night, particularly now, you never know what's going to, I'm going to say, hit you, what's going to come at you the following day. So things are always changing at a very rapid rate, particularly now. I mean, that's motherhood and apple pie, really. I mean, it's trite to say that. So you just got to be absolutely relentless and not be pushed off course by events. You just got to keep hammering away. If you think the strategic insight or thought is right and the structure's right. And by structure, I mean not just how you implement internally, the structure for you as an individual. What it means. Whether I think controlled listed companies where this comes back to my Cambridge. One of the things I got out of Cambridge, which was Robin Maris's book on the theory of managerial capitalism, which just highlighted for me the split between ownership and control. I think that is a problem. I think you have to unify ownership and control. So anything you do, you will be strategically strong, structurally strong, and persistent and relentless if you've cracked that problem as well, which is that you have something at stake. I'm a tremendous believer in, again, going back to Buffett. Buffett said many, many years ago, you wouldn't give an institution a call on your stock for 10 years at zero cost. So why do you do it with management? You're absolutely right. And by that, I mean management should put their money where their mouth is. You should have a stake in the business. You should go out and borrow, mortgage your family, your dog, your house, whatever. And that will give you, a push and focus. I think that's critically important. Quoting somebody else, Jorge Lehmann at ABI, 3G, I remember him saying he doesn't believe in corporate governance. He believes that management should have ownership, that management then will act like owners, and that's what you really need to get good governance. And I think that's true. So put your money where your mouth is, to put it crudely. Yeah,
put your money where your mouth is, and then have that clear vision, and then strategically play the long game.
Yes, and be relentless.
Be relentless. That's like the motto of the day. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sir Martin.
Well, good luck to you, Yasmina. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything that you'd like to plug, for instance, with your work with S4 Capital, or something that you're working on that's interesting?
No, it's fine. I mean, by all means, everybody follow S4. We're S4.L on the London Stock Exchange.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
And you, thank you, and good luck to you. And thanks very much for this. Thank you. God bless.